There is a silent lie that has been whispered into your ear since the moment you entered the school system, an implicit promise sealed with the stamp of social approval and repeated like a mantra by parents, teachers, and corporate mentors. The promise was mathematical and it seemed infallible. Work hard, follow the rules, climb the corporate ladder, and when you hit the magic six-figure mark, the sacred $100,000, you will have made it. You will have won the game. You will have security, comfort, and the freedom to never worry about daily survival again. They lied. And what is most disturbing is not the lie itself, but the scale of it. You haven't arrived. In fact, you likely feel poorer, more anxious, and more cornered than your father felt earning half that amount 30 years ago. You look at your paycheck, you see the numbers, and then you look at your bank account at the end of the month and feel a cognitive dissonance that borders on nausea. How is it possible to earn so much and keep so little? How is it possible to be at the statistical top of the income pyramid and still feel the cold breath of insolvency on your neck with every unexpected expense? Welcome to the silent depression. Welcome to the new high-income poverty line. What we are going to dissect here is not a conspiracy theory. It is the autopsy of a mathematical crime that has been committed against your purchasing power for decades, slowly and methodically, so that you wouldn't notice the heat of the water rising until it was already boiling. To understand the hole we are in, we need to stop looking at the nominal value of money, the numbers printed on paper or on a screen, and start looking at the brutal reality of real value. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes with terrifying precision. If we look at the late Roman Empire around the 3rd century AD, we see an identical pattern. The denarius, the silver coin that was the pride and foundation of Roman commerce, was systematically debased by the emperors. They needed to fund endless wars and a bloated state bureaucracy, so they began mixing cheap metals, like copper, into the silver coinage. At first, no one noticed. The coin had the same face of the emperor, the same name, the same apparent weight. But the intrinsic value was evaporating. A Roman soldier in the time of Augustus could support a family on his pay. 300 years later, that same soldier needed constant nominal raises just to avoid starvation, while the elite accumulated land and real gold. The empire didn't fall because the barbarians were stronger. It fell because the Roman middle class, the backbone of society, was liquidated by inflation and predatory taxation. We are living in the echo of that collapse, but with high-frequency algorithms and digital central banks replacing the mints of Rome. Let's start by dissecting this first layer of illusion, the paradox of apparent wealth. There is a specific psychological cruelty reserved for the current generation. You were programmed to believe that $100,000 a year was the golden ticket to the upper class. And nominally, you are right. Statistically, you are at the top. But the reality of your daily life tells a story of servitude. You wake up, put on the suit, or log onto the computer for your high-responsibility job, manage crises, handle complexities that would make a 1950s worker's head spin, and your reward is survival. You're not buying assets, you're merely renting a lifestyle. The car in the driveway is financed. The house, if you were lucky enough to buy one, belongs to the bank for the next 30 years. The vacation is paid in installments on a credit card. You live in a golden cage where the bars are made of monthly obligations that consume exactly 99% of what you earn. There is no margin for error. If you lose your job tomorrow, how long do you last? 1 month? 3 months? The definition of wealth is not how much you earn. It is how long you can survive without working. And through that lens, the executive today earning 6 figures and the factory floor worker live under the same roof, the roof of total vulnerability. Society applauds your success. The bank offers you black or platinum credit limits to massage your ego, but in the silence of the night, when you run the numbers, you realize you are an imposter in your own life. You earn like the rich, you are taxed like the rich, but you live with the anxiety of the poor. This is the perfect engineering of the current system. Keep you productive enough to generate taxes, but indebted enough to never stop spinning the wheel. To understand how this theft happened, we need to do the cold, hard math. Let's compare 1980 to 2025. We won't use government inflation indices. We will talk about that fraud shortly. We will use tangible purchasing power. In 1980, a salary of $30,000 was considered respectable. With that amount, A man could support a non-working wife, 3 children, buy a 3-bedroom house in a decent suburb, have 2 cars in the garage, and still save for retirement. The average wage and the cost of living danced to the same rhythm. Fast forward to 2025, a salary of $100,000 is numerically more than 3 times the salary of 1980. But what does it buy? In any major Western metropolis, New York, London, Toronto, Sydney, $100,000 barely covers the rent of a 2-bedroom apartment in a safe area, childcare for 1 kid, and basic transport and food costs. The 3-bedroom house in the suburbs? Forget it. That now costs $1 million or more. The stay-at-home spouse? Impossible. Both need to work, and often more than one job, just to keep the lights on. What we are witnessing here is the destruction of the unit of account. If we use gold as a reference, God's money, the only asset that cannot be printed by bureaucrats, the truth reveals itself. In 1980, with the price of gold orbiting $600, a salary of $30,000 bought 50 ounces of gold. Today, with gold hovering around $500, your $100,000 salary buys only 40 ounces. You're working harder with more technology, more productivity, and more stress to accumulate less real wealth than your father accumulated in a bureaucratic 40-hour-a-week job without emails on his phone. You have been robbed of 20% of your life force, and that is only if we consider gold. If we consider the real estate market, the theft rises to 70% or 80%. But wait, if the reality is so obvious when we go to the grocery store or try to buy a house, why do official data say inflation is under control? Why does the news celebrate 0? 1% drops in the price index as if it were the second coming of Christ? Here we enter the third pillar of our analysis, the manipulation of the CPI. The Consumer Price Index is the greatest gaslighting tool in modern history. The government realized decades ago that if it reported real inflation, it would have to pay real adjustments in Social Security, government salaries, and inflation-indexed treasury bonds. That would bankrupt the state. The solution? Change the ruler so the number looks smaller. Throughout the 80s and 90s, and accelerating in the 2000s, Western governments altered the inflation calculation methodology in ways that border on criminal. They introduced the concept of substitution. The logic is perverse. If the price of steak skyrockets and you, having no money, start buying ground beef or chicken, the government does not record that the price of meat went up. It records that you chose to change your habits, and therefore your cost of living remains stable because you spent the same amount of money, even though you are eating garbage. They do not measure the cost of maintaining a fixed standard of living. They measure the cost of your degraded survival. If you move into a tent and eat dog food, the CPI will say inflation has dropped because your expenses have gone down. Another accounting magic trick is hedonic adjustment. If the price of a new car goes up 20%, but the manufacturer added a backup camera and a rain sensor you didn't even ask for, the government says the real price of the car didn't go up because you are getting more technology. They discount inflation based on theoretical quality improvements, while the money leaving your pocket is real and absolute. But the most devastating fraud is in housing. The CPI deliberately ignores home prices. They use something called owner's equivalent rent, an opinion survey where they ask homeowners how much they think they would rent their houses for. It is a fantasy. While home prices have doubled in the last 5 years in many areas, the CPI registered modest increases of 3% or 4% in housing. This allows the government and the central bank to keep interest rates artificially low for longer, further feeding the bubble that is destroying you. They created a world where official inflation is 3%, but your personal inflation, the inflation of the middle-class lifestyle, is 15% per year. Compounded, year after year. That is why you feel like you are running on a treadmill that constantly accelerates. It is not your imagination. It is the mechanism designed to work exactly this way, and this leads us directly to the housing trap. Home ownership was always the foundation of the Western social contract. It was how the middle class built equity, forced savings, and guaranteed stability for old age. That contract has been torn up, burned, and the ashes thrown in your face. There is now a historic decoupling, a tectonic rift between wages and real estate prices. Historically, a house cost about 3 to 4 times a family's average annual salary. Today, in many desirable markets, that ratio is 10, 12, even 20 times. What does this mean in practice? It means the math of ownership is impossible for wage earners, even those with a high salary of $100,000. The classic rule that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on housing has become a bad joke. For someone earning $100,000 after taxes, 30% barely covers the rent of a studio in a major city, let alone the mortgage on a family home. We are witnessing the transition from a property-owning democracy to corporate neo-feudalism. Massive investment funds, like BlackRock and Vanguard, are buying entire neighborhoods, paying cash, above market price, transforming houses that would be a family's home into permanent rental assets on a corporate balance sheet. They don't want you to own anything. They want you to sign a subscription service to have a roof over your head. You become a modern serf, paying monthly tribute to the corporate feudal lord. And the cruelty of this is that without home ownership, you lose the primary hedge against inflation. When you have a fixed-rate mortgage, your housing cost freezes in time, while your salary, theoretically, rises with inflation over 30 years. This is what enriched the boomer generation. By being forced to rent, you are exposed to real estate inflation forever. Every salary increase you get is immediately swallowed by the rent increase. It is a race you cannot win because the financial system prints money faster than you can work, and that money flows first into assets, inflating them before the value reaches your paycheck. But you might argue, at least we have cheap technology. At least I can buy a 60-inch TV for a fraction of what it cost before. And you would be right. And that is exactly where the most insidious trap lies: the hyperinflation of basic needs. The current economic system has created a perverse bifurcation in prices. Everything superfluous, everything that serves to distract you, dopamine you, and keep you passive on the couch has become cheap. Electronics, plastic toys made in China, fast fashion, streaming entertainment, empty calories of processed food, all of this has seen deflation or stable prices. The system wants you to have easy access to bread and circuses. You can be poor, but you will have an iPhone and a giant TV to watch your own decay in high definition. On the other hand, everything essential for life, for human progress, and for social mobility has suffered brutal hyperinflation. We're talking about the three pillars: healthcare, education, and childcare. These costs have exploded, rising 300%, 400%, 500% in recent decades. Think about the perversity of this. What really defines a middle-class life? Is it having a big TV, or is it knowing that if your child gets sick, you won't go bankrupt? Is it having the latest video game console, or is it being able to afford an education that guarantees the next generation's future? University education, which used to be the social elevator, has become an anchor of unpayable debt. In the US and parts of Europe, young people leave college with mortgage-sized debts, but without the house. They start adulthood in the red. The cost of daycare has risen so much that for many families, one parent works solely to pay for the daycare, a zero-sum exchange of vital energy for money just to keep a career alive. And healthcare. Healthcare has become a luxury. Simple procedures, health insurance, essential medications, prices for these items have risen far above any official inflation index. The result is a middle class that looks rich because they have gadgets and trendy clothes, but is biologically and structurally poor. A serious illness, an accident, a special educational need, and the illusion of prosperity dissolves instantly. What a $100,000 salary buys today is a luxury survival kit. It buys the right to participate in the consumer society, but it does not buy the exit from it. It buys toys, but it does not buy freedom. It buys calories, but not nutrition. The system has been recalibrated to extract maximum productivity from you while minimizing the maintenance cost of its workforce, offering cheap distractions as compensation for the loss of real security. It is a Faustian bargain. Surrender your future stability, your real property, and your peace of mind. And in exchange, we will give you unlimited access to digital entertainment and disposable consumer goods. If you are feeling a tightness in your chest hearing this, it is because your intuition already knew what I am saying. You feel it every time you swipe your card at the grocery store and see the total. You feel it when you see real estate prices in your neighborhood. You feel it when you realize that despite earning, well, you cannot save anything significant. But the tragedy doesn't stop at consumption. So far, we've only talked about how your money is worth less when you try to spend it. What we haven't discussed yet is the even more predatory mechanism that attacks your money before it even reaches your bank account. There is an invisible hand that punishes you for trying to earn more, that turns your salary raises into net losses, and that uses inflation as a fiscal weapon against your prosperity. You think high prices are the only problem? You haven't seen anything yet. The real nightmare begins when we look at the tax structure designed for a world that no longer exists, and how it is being used to silently confiscate the little wealth you manage to generate. If inflation is the thief that steals your wallet at night, what comes next is the bank manager locking the doors and setting the building on fire with you inside. Prepare yourself, because now we are going to enter the gears of the human grinding machine the government calls fiscal policy. The cruelest gear in this machine is not the one you see on the price tag on the shelf. It is the invisible hand that punishes your nominal success. We are talking about the phenomenon of fiscal drag. This is the dirty secret that bureaucrats in Washington, London, and Brasilia keep under lock and key. The progressive tax system was sold to you on a premise of social justice. Those who earn more pay more. It sounds fair on paper, but what happens when the government inflates the currency but doesn't correct the tax brackets at the same speed? A silent and devastating confiscation occurs. Imagine you got a 10% raise this year. Your boss shook your hand, congratulated you on your performance. You felt valued. But real inflation was 10% or more. In terms of purchasing power, you are stagnant. You didn't get richer, you just kept your head above water. However, to the tax system, you are now rich. That numerical increase pushed your income into a new tax bracket. Suddenly, you're no longer paying 15% or 20% on that portion of your salary. You're paying 27%, 30%, 40%. The government profits from inflation. The more they devalue money, the more your nominal wage rises to compensate, and the larger the slice they cut from your cake, even though the cake has shrunk in size. It is the perfect storm for the state and the perfect nightmare for the citizen. The government prints money to pay its debts, generating inflation. Inflation forces nominal wages to rise. These higher wages are taxed more heavily. The government collects more, without ever needing to pass an unpopular tax hike law in Congress. It is automated theft. You are running toward the finish line. But with every step you take, the government moves the finish line back and straps lead weights to your ankles. That $100,000 salary, which in the 80s would put you in a comfortable middle-class tax bracket, today puts you in the crosshairs of taxes originally designed for tycoons and heirs, even though your purchasing power is that of a skilled worker from the 90s. It is the penalization of aspiration. The system has been redesigned to prevent you from accumulating capital. It allows you to spin the wheel of the economy, consume and pay interest, but it activates fiscal emergency brakes as soon as you threaten to accumulate enough real wealth to escape the rat race. But the erosion of your standard of living happens not just in the extraction of money, it happens in the physical degradation of the world around you. We now enter the economy of skimpflation and planned obsolescence. Have you ever had the feeling that even when you pay top dollar for something, the quality is offensive? That is not nostalgia. It is a measurable corporate strategy. Companies pressured by rising raw material and energy costs caused by the same inflation corroding your salary face a dilemma: raise prices and scare the consumer, or keep prices and destroy quality. They chose the second option, and this has generated a gigantic hidden cost in your life. In the past, you bought a refrigerator, a washing machine, or a solid wood piece of furniture, and it was a durable asset. It lasted 20, 30 years. It was a solved problem. Today, these items are disposable liabilities. A modern high-tech fridge is designed to fail in 5 or 7 years. Clothes, even from expensive brands, fall apart after a few washes because the fabric is thinner, the seams are weaker. The food. The food is the saddest chapter. To keep prices stable, the industry replaced real ingredients with fillers, inflammatory seed oils, corn syrups, and chemical additives. We are paying filet mignon prices for glorified ground beef. The result is that your real cost of living is much higher than it appears because you have to constantly repurchase your life. You are in a perpetual cycle of replacement. Money that should go into investments goes to replace the microwave that burned out right after the warranty expired, or to buy new clothes because last year's look like rags. Or, and this is the most grave, to pay future medical bills caused by consuming nutritionally void food. Skimpflation has also hit services. You pay for a hotel, but there is no daily cleaning. You pay for banking services, but you are served by a stupid robot. You pay school tuition, but classes are overcrowded and teachers are exhausted. The value exchange has been broken. You hand over real money, or the lifetime you used to earn it, and receive in return simulacra of products and services. It is material entropy consuming your disposable income at the edges, silently, turning the middle class into managers of scrap. And how does the population deal with this abyss between the explosive cost of living and stagnant, taxed income? How do people keep up the appearance that everything is fine? They use the most dangerous tool of financial capitalism, credit, as life support. There was a time when debt had a noble or strategic function. You went into debt to buy a house, an asset, to expand a business, production, or in extreme emergencies. The credit card was for travel convenience. Today, the nature of debt has undergone a malignant mutation. Credit has become a salary supplement. Recent banking data show a terrifying trend. The use of credit cards and buy now, pay later services has exploded, not for buying TVs or vacations, but for buying groceries and gasoline. Think about the gravity of this. People are financing their daily biological existence. They are paying compound interest of 15%, 20%, 30% a year on the bread they ate last week. They are mortgaging their future to guarantee today's dinner. This is not a lifestyle. It is a financial death spiral. When you use credit for basic consumption, you are digging a hole under your feet that gets deeper every day. Next month's salary arrives already committed to last month's consumption, creating a perpetual deficit. The banking system, of course, loves this. To them, a citizen who pays the full balance every month is a deadbeat. The ideal customer is the one who pays only the minimum, dragging the debt eternally, becoming a modern serf who works not for themselves, but to service the debt. The upper middle class, those earning the so-called $100,000, are the preferred targets. They have access to high limits, too much pride to admit bankruptcy, and enough cash flow to keep the interest payments current for years, bleeding slowly until they run dry. Credit disguises poverty. It allows you to maintain the facade of success, the new car, the designer clothes, while your real net worth is negative. It is a financial optical illusion that, when it unravels, ruins entire families overnight. This unbearable financial pressure leads us directly to the death of leisure and systemic burnout. The promise of technology was the liberation of time. We were told computers and automation would do the heavy lifting, and we would have more time for art, family, creative idleness. The reality was the exact opposite. Technology created the 24-hour digital leash, and the inflationary economy destroyed the concept of one job. The single-income family is an archaeological relic. Today, not only do both partners need to work, but the concept of the side hustle has been normalized and glamorized by pop culture. Uber, DoorDash, dropshipping, selling courses, monetizing hobbies. None of this is presented as what it really is, desperation. It is presented as entrepreneurship and hustle culture. The naked truth is that a full-time salary, even a good one, is no longer enough to guarantee safety. You finish your mentally exhausting workday at 6 p.m. and instead of resting, you feel the pressure to be productive, seize to create a second stream of income, to answer emails, to manage complex investments, just not to lose to inflation. Leisure, true rest, has become a sin or an unattainable luxury. Burnout is not an isolated medical condition. It is the natural physiological response of a human organism subjected to an environment of constant predation. We are living in a chronic economic state of fight or flight. Cortisol is always high. Sleep is fragmented. The feeling that if I stop pedaling, I fall is omnipresent. This has destroyed the social fabric. Parents don't have time to raise their children. They outsource it to the state or to screens. Local communities die because no one has time for volunteering or hanging out with neighbors. Life boils down to working, paying bills, recovering energy minimally, and going back to work. The human soul is being freeze-dried by the need for maximum economic efficiency just to stay in the same place. And where does all this lead? What is the end point of this trajectory? The answer is the final point, and perhaps the darkest of all: social bifurcation and the end of the middle class. The middle class is not a historical norm, it was an anomaly. It was a brief golden period between 1945 and 1990, made possible by a unique combination of post-war reconstruction, cheap energy, favorable demographics, and a monetary system that still had some link to reality. That window has closed. What we are seeing now is the return to humanity's historical pattern. A small elite of asset holders and a vast mass of salaried serfs. Society is bifurcating, splitting into two distinct economic species. It is no longer a question of left or right, blue-collar or white-collar. The division now is between those who own assets that appreciate with inflation, stocks, real estate, land, gold, business equity, and those who sell their time for fiat currency that loses value every second. If you earn $100K, $200K, or $500K a year, but own no assets, you are not rich. You are a highly paid worker, but still a servant of the system. You are one firing, one divorce, or one medical diagnosis away from poverty. On the other side of the wall are those who understood the game. They don't work for money. Their assets work. When the government prints trillions, the value of their real estate goes up. The stock market goes up. Inflation makes them richer, while it makes you poorer. It is the Cantillon effect in action. Those close to the money spigot, banks, corporations, the political elite, drink clean water. Those far away, you, the wage earner, drink the toxic sludge of inflation. We are walking toward a technocratic neo-feudalism. You will have all the gadgets, access to virtual reality, food delivered by drones, but you will own nothing. You will rent your house from a global pension fund, rent your car from an automaker that became a software company, and pay subscriptions for everything. From the music you listen to the heated seats in your car, social mobility, the idea that the factory worker's son can become the factory owner, is being suffocated. The drawbridges are being raised. This is the silent depression. There are no soup lines like in 1929 because the government sends digital checks to the hungry. There are no tent cities visible in the wealthy neighborhoods yet, because poverty today is lived inside cramped apartments with LED lighting and Netflix, but with an empty fridge and a mailbox full of collection notices. It is a depression of hopelessness, stagnation, and the loss of a horizon. And here we reach the crucial moment. If you have made it this far, if you have listened to this brutal autopsy of your financial reality and felt the truth resonate in your bones, you have already taken the first step toward the exit. The system counts on your ignorance. It counts on your blind belief that if you just work a little harder, things will improve. They won't, not if you keep playing by their rules. The only way to win a rigged game is to refuse to be a piece on their board. There is a way out. There is a way to build an ark before the flood covers everything. It is not easy, it is not fast, and it requires a complete mental reprogramming. It demands that you stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a capitalist, even if you start with very little. It demands that you understand the difference between currency and money, between price and value, between liability and asset. History shows that in every imperial collapse there was a minority that not only survived but thrived. Those who saw the signs, those who prepared while the crowd danced on the deck of the Titanic. We are not going to wait for a part 2. We are going to address the cure right now. We need to talk about anti-fragile assets, sovereign mindset, and how you can build your own personal fortress amidst the economic chaos. The silent depression is real. The poverty line has risen and swallowed the middle class. The question now is not, why did this happen, but what are you going to do about it before the door closes for good? The answer starts now. Prepare yourself. Now that we have removed the blindfold and you face the naked machinery of the silent depression, you have two options. The first is nihilism. Close this. Go back to the numbness of cheap entertainment. Blame the politicians and wait for the shipwreck while complaining about the rising water. The majority will do this. It is the path of least resistance. It is the path of the victim. The second option is radical realism. It is accepting that the social contract has been unilaterally broken and that, as of today, you are the only minister of the economy, the only central bank, and the only general of defense for your own life. The cavalry is not coming. The state will not save you. The state is, by design, the entity trying to extract every last drop of your productivity to keep itself alive. If you chose the second option, welcome to the resistance. What I am about to describe is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Those don't exist. They are just traps for the desperate. What I am about to describe is a doctrine of financial and mental warfare based on the history of those who survived previous collapses. It is the manual to build your personal ark before the rain starts falling in earnest. The first step is a violent psychological shift, the death of the consumer and the birth of the owner. You were trained since childhood to be a spending machine. The entire Western culture is an algorithm designed to separate you from your capital. They use insecurity, status, and fear to make you exchange hours of life for objects that lose value. You need to reverse this polarity. Stop measuring your wealth by what you can buy and start measuring it by what you can keep. The question isn't, can I make the monthly payment? The question is, does this put money in my pocket or take it out? If the answer is, takes out, and it isn't essential for your biological or professional survival, it is a financial cancer. Cut it. Be ruthless. Strategic minimalism isn't about living in misery, it is about concentrating resources. Every dollar you don't spend on junk is a soldier you recruit for your army of freedom. The second step is the flight from fiat currency. Understand this. Keeping money in the bank is guaranteeing a slow loss. Paper money, or digital money, is an ice cube in the desert. It melts every minute. To protect your vital effort, you need to convert your weak currency into hard money, or real assets. What is a real asset? It is something that cannot be printed by a bureaucrat. It is something finite. Look at history. What has held value for 5 Savozozeren years? Gold and silver, not because they are magic investments, but because they are the only form of money that carries no counterparty risk. If the banking system goes dark tomorrow, an ounce of gold in your safe is still an ounce of gold. It is insurance against chaos. Look at productive land. They aren't making more land. Having a piece of ground where you can plant, or that generates rent, is physical sovereignty. Look at intellectual property and stakes in businesses that solve real problems. In times of inflation, prices rise, and those who own the companies selling essential products capture that increase. The wage earner loses, the owner wins. You need to migrate as fast as possible from the side of those who receive a salary to the side of those who own assets. Even if you start small. Buy one stock, buy one silver coin, buy a course that teaches a sellable skill. But stop accumulating colored paper. This leads us to the third pillar, competence as currency. In a scenario of economic collapse or deep recession, the corporate job market is decimated. The intermediate roles of spreadsheet managers disappear. Who is left? Those who know how to do things. Those who solve tangible problems. Your security is not in your job title, it is in your skill stack. Can you sell? Can you fix things? Can you code? Can you grow food? Do you know first aid? Can you lead people in stressful situations? These are universal currencies. The world can go back to the Stone Age or advance to a cyberpunk dystopia. In either scenario, the competent man has value. Invest in your education, but not the inflated formal education that delivers useless degrees. Invest in practical, technical, applicable knowledge. Become so good at something that the market cannot ignore you, regardless of the crisis. Competence is the only asset they cannot tax, confiscate, or inflate. It travels with you inside your skull. The fourth step is biological defense. It might seem strange to talk about health in an economics briefing, but the body is your primary income-generating asset. In the silent depression, the healthcare system collapses or becomes inaccessible due to price. Getting sick is a terminal financial risk. Being metabolically fragile, obese, addicted to cheap dopamine, and sedentary is an economic death sentence. The resistance starts on the plate and in the gym. A strong body and a clear mind are prerequisites for making hard decisions under pressure. If your brain is fogged by sugar and social media, you will be easy prey for corporate and political predators. Physical sovereignty precedes financial sovereignty. Sleep, train, eat real food. This is a revolutionary act in a world that wants you sick and pharma-dependent. The fifth and final step is the tribe. The myth of the lone wolf is dangerous. In human history, loners die, tribes survive. You need to audit your social circle. Are you surrounded by consumer zombies who just complain and pull you down? Or are you surrounded by builders, by people who are awake to reality? Build networks of trust, people you can count on, people with skills complementary to yours. In hard times, social capital, who you know and who trusts you, is worth as much as money in the bank. Local communities, interest groups, strong families, go back to strengthening these bonds. The state wants you atomized, alone in your apartment, connected only to the screen, because that way you are weak. Connected to other men and women with purpose, you are dangerous to the system and safe against the storm. The silent depression is not an event with an end date. It is the new normal. It is the historical correction of a century of excess. The party is over, the lights came on, and the bill has arrived. Most people will spend the next decade in denial, trying to recover the living standard of 2019, going into debt, crying and waiting for the old world to return. It is not coming back. But this doesn't need to be the end of your story. On the contrary, it can be the beginning. The greatest empires, the greatest fortunes, and the greatest legacies were built during crises, not during the calm. Chaos is a ladder. While the crowd runs in panic, the sober strategist sees the opportunities, sees the cheap assets, sees the unfilled niches. The poverty line has risen to $100,000. Yes, the game is rigged, yes, but you are still on the board. And as long as you have breath, mind, and will, you can play. Stop trying to win the old game. Start playing the new game, the game of real assets, brutal competence, and radical independence. They call this crisis. We call it wealth transfer. The question hanging in the air, heavy and unavoidable, is just one. On which side of the transfer will you be when the dust settles? With those who lost everything they thought they had, or with those who built everything no one can take away? The master file is open. The truth has been spoken. The action is now yours. See you in the trenches.